Let's turn now to NBC News legal analyst Cynthia Alksne. So, Cynthia, you're a former federal prosecutor. What's your reaction? Was this the verdict you expected?
It is the verdict I expected. Not just a former federal prosecutor, but I prosecuted police cases. So it's something that is near and dear to me, and I recognize how incredibly difficult they are. You know, it's worth reflecting today to let people realize how difficult these cases are, that when George Floyd originally died, the statement from the police department just was, man dies after medical incident. Officers were able to handcuff him. He was in medical distress. They called an ambulance and he died. And that was the press release. I tweeted it out. But for that video and the bravery of the people around, we would never really have had this case. George Floyd would have died, and we never would have had a winnable trial. But for the video, and then finally we see that police officers supported the prosecution all the way up from the first officer on the scene all the way to the police chief. But of course, they knew and were able to testify that it was excessive force because of the video. So everything hinged on that video and the bravery of that young lady to take it.
That's absolutely true. Something that is so worth talking about, especially given that she was just 17 years old at the time that she took that video, and it's what's caused this whole movement. Now, Cynthia, so now we have these 2 counts of murder and this count of manslaughter where Derek Chauvin has been found guilty. Now, there are 3 former officers that are also expected to face trial for aiding and abetting second-degree murder and manslaughter charges in August. Now that we have this guilty verdict on those 3 charges here for Chauvin, what kind of effect does that have on this case we see later this summer?
Wow, it has a huge effect on the case. Those defendants are going to have to make a couple of decisions. First off, I'm sure there will be plea offers, particularly to the two rookies. There were 2 officers who, this was their 3rd or 4th shift, and they, the officer said, "Oh, I'm worried he doesn't have a pulse," and the other officer. Those 2, my guess is they'll be pretty reasonable plea offers. And then Officer Tao, who stood there and kept the crowd back and kept that EMT officer from providing any assistance to George Floyd, is also he's the one who's in the most amount of trouble in terms of not getting a plea offer that he's really looking for. So they're going to have to make a decision about plea officers. The other thing they have to make a decision about is whether or not they're going to have a jury trial or a judge trial. And my guess is all those negotiations are going on. I wouldn't be surprised if this ended all in plea arrangements for all 3 officers.
And Cynthia, for Chauvin, sentencing is now 8 weeks away. How much prison time could he be facing, and what is the judge going to consider when making the decision?
All right. Well, Minnesota has sentencing guidelines, like most states, and the sentencing guidelines for each of these top 2 counts are like 10 3/4 to 15, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean the judge has to give that sentence. He'll get a pre-sentence report, which they're going to work on now, and he'll also evaluate whether or not they're aggravating of circumstances. The prosecutors in this case have said they are going to file a motion that the sentencing should be higher than the recommended 10 3/4 to 15 because of aggravating circumstances. One of those is that Chauvin was in a position of trust and authority. Another one may be his refusal to provide any aid. And so we'll see if they come up with others. There's no rule on how many aggravating circumstances they apply for. So once the prosecution says we want this higher sentence, the defense will have an opportunity to respond, and the judge would ultimately rule. I would guess he goes a little higher, but you don't really know. So certainly it's in somewhere in the 12 to 20 range for each count. For the top 2 counts.
Cynthia, so much of that is so complicated. So thank you for breaking it down for us as we all look to what happens next. No, you did a great job. Thank you so much.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.